We're joined by Josh Kirby from The Times, a money mentor. Today we're talking finance. We think of the economic crisis we're in right now, the war in Ukraine, energy prices, so much going on, right? Your money doesn't get you anywhere, it feels like. How bad is it right now?
It's not great. Some people are going into this kind of crisis a lot more prepared than other people. The good news is there are things that you can do. It's amazing how many people I talk to, they don't even pay into their pensions. You know, that scares me a bit. Do you guys all do that?
No. Welcome everyone to another episode of The Men's Room. As always, I'm joined by the great Rory Jennings, and today we're talking finance. You don't like that tag, do you?
Oh, I love it. I think it's inaccurate and misleading, but I love it.
It's so true. Rory, you had a good question, I think, off air that you want to ask Josh, and I think it's important to kind of get this one out of the way straight away.
Yeah, Josh, when we were going to speak to you and talk to somebody about finances,
Yes.
and obviously I heard that it was going to be you, I assumed that you were going to be 48, maybe a house in the Chilterns.
If only.
Somebody who wasn't so young.
Well, I think people have this kind of like image of personal finance as this kind of like fusty old man's game. But to be honest, like I don't think it is. And I think a big part of kind of why I like my job so much and why I sort of got into personal finance journalism is to kind of like get younger people a bit more sort of on their money. Because a lot of my friends just don't have a clue. It's amazing how many people I talk to, they don't even pay into their pensions. You know, that scares me a bit.
Do you do that?
I do that, yeah. For me, but do you guys all do that?
No.
Oh, honestly, like it's
No.
but
Well,
like you're
I don't really know what it means.
Yeah.
we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that is like fundamentally important for setting yourself up for later on in life. Now that makes me sound really, really boring. Ultimately, like when I started to get into journalism, I applied for a job at Money Saving Expert. With Martin Lewis, who's obviously brilliant.
Oh, is he your hero? Is he your Frank Lampard?
He is my Frank Lampard. He's my Thierry Henry, as an Arsenal fan. And so my dad, he was always like very on it with his money, so he kind of like got me into those habits. So I saw a job at Money Saving Expert. I'd always wanted to get into journalism. I didn't have a master's or anything like that, so I thought, you know, sod it, I'm just gonna go for it. And I started working there and learned a hell of a lot. They've got a really great team over there. And then I came over to the Times about 6 months ago, and I've been working in the Money Mentor team over here.
That's so good.
How bad is it right now? Because we're of an age where we remember sort of housing crisis before, economy shut down before, but I never remember it all in one. I don't remember, obviously, going through a war that we're going through, the back of COVID. I say the back of COVID, it's still very much here. House prices have just gone crazy. Me and Rory always talk about sort of, you can't afford to live in London, even though you're a Londoner, it's impossible. How bad is it right now?
It's not great. That's the answer. It's pretty bad. It really depends on who you are. Obviously, everyone's situation is different. Some people are going into this kind of crisis a lot more prepared than other people, but it sucks basically. It's not a nice time. The good news is there are things that you can do. Ultimately, it's going to come down to people changing their habits, right? Because people aren't going to be able to. A lot of people, most people, I would say, aren't going to be able to sustain the same habits that they had before. That's a real shame. It's very unfortunate. But people are going to have to basically make tweaks to the way that they live. And it's going to be difficult. We're headed into a winter. We've not seen the worst of it yet. That's kind of the biggest problem, is that things are going to get worse as energy bills go up. There are certain protections, and I'm sure we'll get into that as well. But it's not great. But there are things for people to kind of like be positive about as well, and we'll get into all of those.
Generally speaking, you know, when you asked Ade and I then, you boys are paying into your pensions presumably, and we both immediately said no.
Sure.
Are you finding that the general society are adopting the things that you would suggest, or are you finding that most people, Ade and I, are fairly typical, where we don't really do very much about our future?
I think it is quite typical. I think that is definitely true, and I think it's changing right now because there is a spotlight suddenly on personal finance. For a long time, it was kind of the thing that maybe your uncle did or your dad did. It wasn't particularly sexy at all. But now I think people are spending a lot more time thinking about, you know, where's my money going to go? Because suddenly the purse strings have to be tightened. So I think that is definitely something that people are thinking about more. And I think the fact that people are struggling a bit now means that people are thinking, well, if I don't set myself up quite well for later on in life, like this could sort of be the way things are for a while.
When you say the purse strings are being tightened, there are going to be people listening to this thinking there are no purse strings, right? They're not even living check to check. They're running out of money before the next check comes. People, especially if we get into winter time now, people are having to sort of choose between sort of heating the house or buying food. It's got that bad. I've been sort of reading stories.
Definitely.
So what can they do? Because look, we're in a privileged position. I'm okay financially. I have to admit I'm not in the worst, but there are people out there that are in positions where they can't look beyond the next meal. It's got that bad for them.
Ultimately, there is no one-size-fits-all answer. It really depends on your situation. Like you say, there are some people that are struggling so much they don't know where their next meal is going to come from. Those people, there's some help out there. That's one of the answers. There is help out there. There's government help available. On the Times Money Mentor website, we list a lot of the help that you can get. There are grants that you can apply for depending on your circumstances. If you're receiving universal credit, for instance, there are certain things that you can apply for, rebates on your energy, more money so you can warm your home come winter. Obviously, there are food banks there for people that need them. There are websites that you can go on that show you your nearest food bank. If you're desperate, there is help out there. It's, in my opinion, I don't think it's sufficient help. And that's kind of the problem. When you enter a crisis, it gets tougher. It gets really, really tough. And the help that's initially available becomes sort of insufficient. But there are things that people can apply for. I think a lot of people struggle with debt as well. And if you're in debt, there is help out there. Firstly, there are ways to manage debt. There are ways to kind of cut the costs of debt. So let's say you're in thousands of pounds worth of debt on a credit card. And a lot of people are going to find themselves in a lot more debt at the end of this crisis than they were at the start of it. And there are ways to manage that. So you can shift your debt. You can use something called a balance transfer credit card. So if you've got a lot of debt, that gives you sort of up to 3 years to not pay any interest. So you can clear the debt a lot quicker. So things like that. It really depends on where your financial problems are coming from. And based on those, you can kind of sort them out.
Do you live in London?
I do live in London. Yeah, I live in North East London.
See, that is something that I'm finding. Even touch wood. As Ade mentioned, we're lucky, but I find the prices in London ridiculous. Housing. Are you finding that? Is there this
crazy
crisis?
It's crazy. So
do you live on your own?
I live in a house with a few other people.
So you've had to do the house share? We've
had to do the house share.
Right.
I don't mind the house share. I'm still kind of young. So for me, like, I probably would do it anyway, even if rent was a bit cheaper, because it's kind of, I'm at a point in my life where I like socializing. It's quite fun, yeah. And we all really get on. So it's all good on that front. But it is ludicrously expensive. So I pay nearly £800 a month for a bedroom. A bedroom in a house. That's the going rate now in London.
What's going on with because this, to me, and I don't want to make this sort of a very London-centric podcast, but the housing crisis is at its epicenter in London.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, what's going on, and what's the answer to this? Like, for me to buy a property in the area I grew up, which is Borough Camden, I couldn't afford a one-bedroom flat there. Genuinely, I couldn't afford a one-bedroom flat in the borough of Camden, in the bit that I'm from. So anywhere between Swiss Cottage, Primrose Hill, it will cost you 900 grand. Like, that's mental, isn't it? Like, that's a broken system.
100%. So property is one of the things I'm most interested about, because property in this country is, unfortunately, the market is just broken, right? So essentially what we've got a really static supply of property in this country. It doesn't really move. New houses aren't really built. When they are, it tends to be by really wealthy property developers. They build those flats they're going to be ludicrously expensive. They're built for, very wealthy people. And we don't have a lot of space in London anymore either to build that accommodation. So what you basically get is you get a market where supply is static, demand's constantly increasing. You think about the pandemic, a lot of people left London. A lot of people are now coming back because, they went off to the country, or they moved home with their parents, or things like that.
Interestingly, it never went down.
Yeah.
It never... When people left London and when the crisis hit, I thought that could have an impact on the housing.
Yeah.
And at the time, we were looking for a house.
Sure.
I thought that could potentially work for us. Didn't have any impact.
That's the thing.
In terms of dropping the prices. If anything, they maintained or went up. I feel like the property situation of London and probably the South East is irreparable. Is it that drastic? Are you hearing that it's that drastic?
So the government have now basically said that they want to commit to building, 300,000 homes a year. I think Michael Gove said that the other day. And that is a step towards fixing the problem. Now, the problem with London specifically is that it's so difficult to build property here. There's a lot of red tape. Like I say, there's not a lot of space. So I think London, London is going to kind of grow.
Yeah.
I think people are going to have to move out of London. They're going to have to live in Hertfordshire.
They'll live in Slough, but sure. Slough will somehow be on the tube or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the problem is the problem's just going to spread, right? So rents and property prices are going to go up in places like Slough, and it's just kind of going to spread out. So there are a few kind of solutions to this problem, but the only real solution is building more property. And combine that with what's going on in the mortgage market at the moment. Mortgage rates have shot up. Yeah. So they were just over 4% at the start of September. For an average 2-year fixed mortgage now, you're looking at like 6.5%. So that's a huge jump. That's like a 2% jump.
Yeah, it's appalling. I mean, that's the difference between being able to afford your mortgage and not, isn't it?
Definitely. For loads of families, that is the case. So their mortgage payments have gone up, in some cases, by hundreds of pounds if you're not on a fixed rate mortgage. And that's another point. If you're not on a fixed rate mortgage, you need to have a real think about whether it's worth locking into one now, remortgaging, especially if you're kind of in like, or you're coming up to the end of a mortgage deal. It's really worth thinking about locking into a fixed rate mortgage now, because it's looking like they're just going to keep on going up.
Lots of people are going to be stung by this. How can they dampen the pain that this is going to cause? How can you soften this blow?
If you're on a fixed rate, you're not going to be affected for some time. You're not going to be affected until you come off that deal. If you're in the last 6 months of a deal, you can speak to a mortgage broker now, and you can already lock into into the current rate. So when your deal ends, you'll be on the current rate. You won't be on the rate in 6 months' time, if that makes sense. So you kind of give yourself a bit of breathing space that way. At the end of the day, people's mortgage payments are going to go up, right? So we've had really low mortgage rates in this country for quite a few years. And that's been kind of one of the counterpoints of house prices increasing a lot, is that, well, at least mortgage rates are really low, a lot lower than they used to be. But now we kind of have a double whammy of really high house prices and mortgage rates going up, and we could be stuck on that for a few years. If you're locking into a fixed rate now, I'd say if you're on a variable rate, it's probably worth locking into a deal for at least 2 years. Okay. That's not certain. It really depends on your situation. You need to weigh up. You need to look at the market, have a look at all the kind of articles that have been written about it, really think about what's going to happen to interest rates, because no one has a crystal ball. We don't know with any certainty. Basically, the Bank of England is increasing interest rates to get a handle on inflation, first and foremost. Inflation's at 10%, 10.1%, right? And inflation, their usual target for inflation is about 2%. So they've got to really bring down inflation, right? It's way above what it's supposed to be.
In a really simple way, why are we at this point? Is this off the back of Liz Truss's crazy policy? Is that what this is? Because Rishi Sunak sort of predicted this, didn't he, when they were in there?
He did.
And he was correct.
Yeah, and he was kind of slammed as being, sensationalist. But at the end of the day, he's kind of been proven right to a T. So it is in no small part due to Liz Truss's and Kwasi Kwarteng's policies.
What a pair of pricks, eh?
I know they've really gone and they've screwed the pooch. It's crazy what's happened. And right off the back of their announcements, the markets basically, they freaked out. But the Bank of England was already raising interest rates, right? Inflation was already sky high when Liz Truss came into power. So while she played no small part in interest rates going up and the markets basically,
exploding,
yeah. It's not solely down to that. And I think we would have still seen an increase in rates. I think it would have just not been as significant and not been as sudden. But it would have still happened. Yeah. It would have just happened.
Do you think we're in safer hands now? Do you think Rishi is a safer pair of hands?
I think he's a safer pair of hands. I think my personal opinion of it is that I think, he's much more pragmatic.
But he's not going to do anything crazy. He's not likely to do anything crazy in the way that Kwarteng and
No, I don't think he is. He's a much more kind of pragmatic, sensible guy. You look at his track record. You look at the way he was when he was Chancellor. He spent money. Don't get me wrong. In COVID, he spent a lot of money.
Yeah. Eat out to help out.
Eat out to help out.
I had a great time during that.
Yeah, that was brilliant. I only got to use it once because I was on holiday most of the time, so I used it in the airport. But it was great, and he spent a lot of money sort of bailing out businesses that would have gone bust in COVID. He's not able to do that as much because we're still kind of digging ourselves out of that economic hole, but he kind of had to get us into that economic hole. So he's very pragmatic with his approach. I think he's much more sensible than Liz Truss. He's not going to go and do anything really radical. No, he's not that kind of prime minister. And I think the party, the Conservative Party can't afford to have someone like that running the party because if they do, they're kind of on their last chance saloon right now.
Yeah. What I think, sorry to cut across your loving with each other. I think the average Joe listens to a lot, especially those that are hand to mouth. So they listen to things like what you're talking about with sort of fixed mortgages and moving balance transfers from credit cards. I don't think they have a clue what all that means,
Absolutely.
if I'm honest with you. I can go back to when I was really struggling many years ago, and I think the first thing I did stupidly when I thought money was running out was I went to one of those payday loan people, or payday loan sharks, and got stuck down the road of having to pay that, and eventually it all just came on top. obviously those don't really exist no more. So we think, but they're still out there.
What, are they no longer? What? I know the payday loans that you're referring to. Are they not around anymore?
They can't charge nearly the same amount of interest, right? So you can get sort of emergency credit, but your interest is going to be capped. Like it used to be.
Yeah, it was what they wanted it to be, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was like
Crazy.
3,000%.
It was vicious, evil stuff.
But at the time, for me though, it's weird to say this. It sounded fine. This is how crazy it is. I remember like getting a £300 loan.
And you think, I'll pay double back next week. Yeah,
you only have to pay £350 back in 20 days. I was like, oh, perfect. Yeah. Easy. And then again, it came on top. And I know a lot of people have been down that road.
So this is a really interesting thing right now, debt, because you have stuff like Klarna, right?
Yeah.
That's coming into the mainstream. People think of Klarna as like, oh, it's just another way to pay. Klarna is debt. And something that really kind of scared me as someone that deals with debt and sort of writes about debt and deals and sort of speaks to people who are in debt on quite a regular basis. Klarna getting sort of so much traction worries me. They've added it to Deliveroo, right? Imagine yourself.
I find that crazy.
That is crazy.
If you can't afford something at the time, so whenever I want to buy anything, and I've been this way, whether I've been feeling fairly flush or feeling completely brassic, if I can't pay for it, I would never buy it. You know, like if I don't have the money in my pocket, I don't buy it.
That's a really healthy attitude to have. A lot of people they don't have that attitude. And when debt is so easy to acquire, which Klarna makes it really, really easy, right? Because they don't do like hard credit checks. They do soft credit checks. When you apply for a credit card, you'll face a hard credit check where they go through your credit history with a fine-tooth comb. They check everything. They check how good you've been at repaying credit in the past, whether you're on the electoral roll, things like that. And there's loads of things you can do to improve your credit score, but that's kind of beside the point. So they make sure you can repay the debt. Klarna don't do that. They do a soft credit check. It's a lot less kind of strict. And it makes it really easy to take on debt. So let's say, and the fact that Klarna people have this association with it, that it's used for like buying clothes or like a new laptop or an iPhone, right? That is, if you can't afford it, exactly like you said, Rory, you probably shouldn't be buying it. So debt is, don't get me wrong, debt isn't always bad, right? There are good forms of debt. A mortgage is debt, right? And people need a mortgage to buy a house.
No, but it's very different. I don't think you can compare buying clothing for Friday night when you're going out to the Camden Palace.
Or a takeaway.
Yeah. It's not the same. It isn't the same. And maybe there needs to be a bigger structure in place here. Maybe these companies shouldn't be allowed to do that.
I think so. It's really interesting you say that. So this market isn't regulated, right? The buy now, pay later it's called. So it's not just Klarna, there's like ClearPay and other ones. Yeah. So it's not regulated. Right, so this is really scary.
It's like Wild West.
It's a Wild West, and so Martin Lewis from Money Saving Expert, he's been going on for years about how this market needs to be regulated, and they've done small things like Klarna's starting to report your data to credit reference agencies and things like that, but it's not enough. So until they're properly regulated, like you say, it's a Wild West. The government should be coming in and looking at this and saying, you shouldn't be able to get into debt for a takeaway.
But people need to take some responsibility for themselves, don't they?
Certainly.
Like this isn't only a governmental thing.
Certainly.
This is if you can't afford
you say that,
it,
but if Klarna are doing food, if it's got to a stage where you're having to do food on credit,
it's not food, it's takeaways though.
Takeaways.
So takeaways are different. Takeaways are very expensive. Takeaways are luxurious.
Yeah.
People get a takeaway on a Friday night.
It's a luxury.
Takeaway is a luxury.
Cooking is going to be a quarter to half the price, right? So at the end of the day, you're spending money that you don't need to spend.
Of course it is.
I don't know if it is anymore. No, honestly, if you go go to your local Asda and buy £15 worth of food, you feel like you're coming out with nothing.
No, but that's
as opposed to buying a takeaway. I don't know if it is.
If you were to buy the ingredients to cook up a chili, you'd get 3 meals out of it.
That's the thing. So you kind of like, you go to the supermarket, you buy your ingredients, and then there's like a startup cost, but then you can cook a lot of meals out of it. I've started kind of like doing HelloFresh once in a while as well.
Yeah.
And it comes in and I cook loads of meals, and it sorts me for like, the whole week, if not longer. And I feed my housemates with it sometimes as well.
So why do you think they do it then? Laziness?
I think there is, let's say you're sat on the couch, you're hungover on a Saturday. The last thing you want to do is get up and cook. You just go on your phone or Uber Eats. It's that easy. You press one button, they bring it right to your door. But then you pay like the delivery fee. You're paying.
Dear.
It's dear.
It is.
It adds up.
It is dear.
Yeah.
So you think that these things need to be regulated? Do you think that that's down the road? Are we moving in that direction?
We are, but not quickly enough. That's kind of the problem, is that these things are always so slow when it comes to finance and when it comes to money and regulating things. The machines, the powers that be, that they're in charge of controlling this stuff, they're not very well oiled. So it takes a long time to get these things going, get them through Parliament. It's not moving quickly enough. And it's while that's happening, loads of young people are just getting into debt because it's so easy and it's so normalised. You know,
do you ultimately think that, and this is going off what Rory said, that if we take responsibility, you can not get through it, but you can manage it a lot better. Like a lot of people that are young have debts, have got flashy phones. You go to the houses, big TVs, PlayStations, the latest trainers. Once you do cut back and be a bit more responsible, you can sort of get through this tough time.
I think so. Again, it's different for everybody. There are some people who, for them, the situation is really tough, right? And making a few sacrifices here and there is not going to be enough. But for a lot of people, like I sort of mentioned before, unfortunately, there are going to be sacrifices you have to make. You know, my phone's a couple of years old now, a few years old. New iPhone comes out. I'd love to buy a new iPhone. I see that like 40 quid a month. I'm like, oh, I could afford that. 40 quid a month, you know, that's going to add up. And that's money that I could be spending on food and doing other things. And so I'm going to be like, oh, I'll wait until the next iPhone. And then
the general consensus of people your age would take the phone, wouldn't they?
100%.
I think a lot of people would.
100%.
They would.
Yeah, they would. And like I say, when debt's being normalised and it's so easy to like get a new phone, you can get it on Klarna or you can get it on like, you know, contract. It's like, why not?
It's interesting that you say it's normalised like that because it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It isn't seen as being a stigma. It isn't something to concern yourself. All your mates are in debt, so you join the party effectively.
And it's so easy to get in debt.
Yeah.
Like you said, I mean, that phone, you could have that in, I don't know, a minute phone call with your phone.
It'd be with you in the morning, wouldn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think? Have you got any tips? Like, funnily enough, on the way here, I was reading the paper and there was a little cutout where they were giving people, or apparently people are doing this already. They're showering at the gym and they're charging their phones up in the cafe or at work.
So I've got a couple of tips on that. So I have a kind of like a discounted gym membership through work. If you sort of have one of those, take advantage of it because it's a great way to kind of like get a cheap gym membership at the moment when things are so expensive. I think when it comes to like things like charging your phone, the cost is so low. It's like it's fractions of a penny. But things like showering, that does add up. You know, that can cost like sort of up to £1 a shower. So those things do add up when there's a few of you in the house as well. So if you're in the office anyway and you can shower at work, I would. Another thing is kind of like having the heating on is obviously a lot more expensive than it used to be. So a tip I've sort of got there, you can actually buy like an electric gilet or like an electric blanket and they cost pennies to run for a week. So, you know, if you have one at your desk.
Mate, that is incredibly luxurious. An electric, just put a jumper or a blanket on, an electric gilet.
I know.
What on earth are you doing? Mate, also, you're allowed to be a bit chilly in the house.
Yeah.
I have this with my missus, you know.
100%.
I have this with my missus.
Yeah.
I'm like, you do not put that heating on until December. She's walking about in a t-shirt and shorts.
Yeah, put a hoodie on.
Walking about in a t-shirt and
I know,
shorts with the
yeah.
heating on full
I'm
blast.
totally with you, Rory. I'm totally with you. My house is split down the middle. There's a couple of us that are like, we won't put the heating on until February, and even then it's like hour a day. Like, because I'll put another jumper on.
Yeah,
like,
put
I'm
another
fine.
jumper on. Get under the blanket.
When do you think that mainly kids should start to understand about finances? Like, obviously, it's not taught in school.
It's not taught in
It's
school.
not taught in school. When do you think they should be taught about it?
I think they should be taught in school. I think that there are a lot of important lessons. People have no idea about the process of buying a house, right? And that's as a process that's becoming a lot more difficult. Back in the day, your parents marched over to the bank. It was easy, right?
Three times their yearly salary, wasn't it?
Ridiculous.
3 times their yearly salary.
So over the last...
My mum, single mother, bought a flat in Maida Vale for me and her. Me and my missus both graft all the time. Couldn't dream of it.
No chance.
It's crazy. So the house prices have grown at twice the rate of the average wage, right? So it's much more difficult now than it used to be over like the last 20, 30 years. It's crazy how much house prices have grown. So that makes it so much more difficult to get on the property ladder. So, and kids, coming back to your question, Ade, kids just aren't learning about those processes in school. They're not learning about, you know, how you buy a house, how it's so important to basically get working on your credit score from like a really kind of young age. When I was 18, I got a credit card. Now, a lot of people maybe shouldn't do this if you don't trust yourself. If you're kind of like, you know, an impulsive spender, like we were kind of talking about earlier, maybe you shouldn't get a credit card at the age of 18. But what doing that did is I kind of like built up my credit score over time. Just make sure you pay it off every month, clear the balance. Otherwise, you're going to pay interest. You don't want to do that unnecessarily. But I'll use a credit card for like all my purchases, and then I'll pay it off every month, right? So by doing that, I build up my credit score. When it comes to sort of, if I need a loan or to buy a house later down the line, it's going to be a lot easier for me. A lot of people, they don't know what their credit score is.
Yours must be 999, isn't it?
Is that how they do it? Is it? Do you know yours?
embarrassing.
We should find out for this.
We should
find
we
out
really
for this.
should. Yeah.
I mean, in the name of getting people talking about their finances, definitely. But yeah. It's mine's all right. I'm not going to disclose it on air, but
really high. Yeah. Mine's not in the nines, but
do you know?
Yeah, I know mine. Yeah.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, it's quite easy to work on. It's easy to improve your credit score. And there were times at university when my credit score was not so good. I'll be honest, when things were tighter. But it's something that you can work on. There's so many different things you can do to improve your credit score. Not just sort of having a line of credit and using it and repaying it, showing the banks that you can repay debt. But like I said before, getting on the electoral roll, it's really easy. It takes 2 minutes, and that really improves your credit score.
What, just being on the electoral roll?
Yeah, being on the electoral
roll.
roll.
How do you know? You bought a house. How do you not know this stuff?
My credit score? I don't have a
clue. No idea.
No idea. I didn't know.
Did you buy it cash or something?
No, I didn't. Being on the electoral roll, simply being on it, has an impact on your credit score.
It does improve your credit score. Yep. And also having a consistent address.
Is that bribery? Is that a way of making sure you're on the electoral roll?
I don't know exactly why it is.
It must do, because there's no credit to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it must be.
I think it's more of a way of like verifying your address. So also having like a consistent address between all your banks is like a really good way of kind of keeping your credit score in good shape.
Right.
Can I ask you, as we wrap up, this crisis we're in right now, is there light at the end of the tunnel? Like, what is it? Because right now, again, for me, looking at it, I go to the petrol pump, and my car, literally, I don't want to tell you what it costs to fill up my car. House prices, I'm trying to buy a house now. It's impossible. Yeah. Honestly, I remember you said this to me, and I thought you were joking. It's impossible now. I feel like I have to save 100 grand, which I don't have Rory's money. I can't save that. So it seems almost impossible. Like, where's the light at the end of the tunnel?
There is light at the end of the tunnel. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. I'm an optimistic person. I think things will improve. It could take a couple of years, right, for that to happen. The Bank of England is desperately trying to bring inflation down. We all want them to succeed, because if they do, everything gets cheaper. Your food bill gets cheaper at the supermarket. Petrol gets cheaper, right? So hopefully prices will start to come down once we're kind of out of this energy crisis. A big part of what's kind of fueling the energy crisis is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Hopefully we see a conclusion to that very soon and things start to improve. There is light at the end of the tunnel. These crises, they come about, unfortunately, kind of like every 15, 20 years. They eventually end, and the economy starts to grow again. So it really depends on, the government's actions. We're going to see there's a budget. The government's going to announce its budget in a couple of weeks. We're going to see what they do. There's kind of murmurings that they might raise taxes and things like that to try and basically tackle the economic crisis that we're in. But things will improve. They always do, and they will again.
Look on the bright side. I need you in my life. How do I? I'm getting my phone.
Yeah, honestly, how does everyone get in touch with you? Do you have like your own Twitter and?
So my Twitter handle is @JoshKirbyWrites. I'm not very active on Twitter, but if you follow @TimesMoneyMentor,
I'm following you, dude.
If you follow me, I've just
Josh
got started.
Kirby.
Josh Kirby Writes. I really don't use Twitter a lot, but you feel free to follow me on there. I'm going to try and start being a lot more active on there as things get a lot more heated in the economy.
Okay, and what was the other thing to follow?
@TimesMoneyMentor on Instagram. I do a lot of videos.
Oh, is that your page there?
That's the Times Money Mentor page, but I do a lot of video content. We've got a load of really useful tips on there. We're always posting. And, head to the Times Money Mentor website as well. Loads of content on there that's really, really helpful. We're regularly reacting to kind of the news and posting help for people in these times, so you can kind of keep track of.
Mate, I've got you. I'm following you, and I'm following the Times Money Mentor. Thank you so much. This is exactly what I need in my life.
No worries at all. It's like I say, it's really important that people kind of get to grips with their finances, especially now. If there's any silver lining of what we're going through, it's hopefully people get more educated about their finances.
And how old are you again?
I'm 25.
Would you recommend that we sort our pensions out?
I would definitely sort your pension out. You don't want to be sort of getting to retirement age and not having, a decently sized pension.
I thought you just got one when you got old.
You do get a state pension, but it's poxy. You get a private pension, but you need to pay into that. So it'll be but also pensions, any kind of income that you get, any interest, that's tax free up to a certain point. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's a really good way of basically saving. I don't pay much, and I pay like 150 quid a month into my pension, but that's really going to add up because it's such a long period of time and you get compound interest.
The problem is we're so old now.
How long left?
We're 20 years away from retirement. So we'd have to chuck in $1,000 a month to make it even worthwhile.
Can't afford to pay in.
Yeah.
Mate, thank you so much. It really is brilliant to have you on.
Josh,
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a
insight's
pleasure.
Fantastic, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to hit you up on Twitter. I will, because I need assistance desperately.
Well, you're welcome to get in touch anytime, and I'll try and answer your questions.
I'll be hiring you up privately, if I'm honest with you. Josh, as always, thank you very much. Rory, thank you very much. Another interesting episode of the Men's Room podcast. Make sure you download the podcast wherever you download them from, or you can watch this back on YouTube as well. That's what I like to do. Make sure you leave a comment. We'll be in the comments, won't we?
We will. We certainly
Responding
will.
to a few. Josh will probably jump in the comment section as well and answer some of your questions. Nice of Josh. Thank you very much.